Today I'm joined by Dr. Belén López-Pérez, a lecturer in psychology at the University of Manchester, based in the Division of Psychology, Communication and Human Neuroscience. Belén's research focuses on interpersonal emotion regulation, so that's how we influence other people's emotional experiences in everyday life, and her work is increasingly exploring the digital and AI-mediated support. So thank you so much for joining us today. So just up front, for anyone who doesn't know your work yet, how do you describe what you do and what are the kind of questions that you're most interested in right now?
Thank you so much for having me today. So as you have said, my research is focused on how we regulate the emotions of others. So I would say that my research has two strands. So on the one hand, trying to understand how we provide emotional support to others and how this can be effective for the person receiving the emotional support, but also how we can potentially improve the well-being of the regulator. So that would be one strand. And the other strand is focused on how sometimes intentionally and sometimes unintentionally, we may worsen the feelings of other people. So I'm just trying to understand what are the motives and, what are the strategies or the means we use, to worsen the feelings of others.
That's really interesting. Okay, so thinking about not only how somebody might try to make someone else feel better if they're feeling sad or upset about something, but also how perhaps intentionally or unintentionally we might make somebody feel worse in a particular situation. Are there situations where that might be a good thing, like when an altruistic thing, perhaps?
Yeah. So we have so it all started, with maybe it's related to my PhD background. So my PhD was focused on empathy and altruism, because I was following the strand of Daniel Batson, who proposed the empathy altruism hypothesis. So when I started looking at interpersonal emotion regulation, there were some papers suggesting that when we worsen the feelings of others, we do it because we just want to cause as much pain as possible, which would be purely counter-hedonic motivations, or because by worsening other people's feelings, we can actually take advantage of that. So for example, in competitions or in competitive contexts, you might try to make your rival feel bad because you can benefit, you can take advantage from that situation. But I don't know whether I had an insight moment, but I was like, hold on a minute, but there are actually instances in which feeling negative can be beneficial. Maybe not in the short term, but sure in the long term. So, for example, you might be with a partner, that you love, but that person may be abusive, or or maybe cheating on you, and sure, breaking up with that person in the short term, you might feel very negative, but in the long term, it might be beneficial to to stay away from that toxic relationship. So it's the concept of cruel to be kind. So that's what we started investigating a while ago, actually 11 years ago, even if the paper just was published in 2017, but it takes a while since you collect the data until things get published. And so I got this insight, and we adapted actually the design of other lab, and we tried to think, okay, how we can twist it to explore these these altruistic components. So I mixed up some methodology from my PhD to what these other people have done, and we investigated it, and we managed to publish it. And then we have conducted other studies where we have observed that sometimes this affect worsening can happen for altruistic reasons. So I, as regulator, may not benefit directly from making you feel bad. Actually, it can backfire our relationship if I do that, but I do it because I genuinely care about the recipient of the regulation, and I generally think that this is going to have a positive effect in the long term.
That's really interesting. Okay, so you mentioned that you started looking at this a while back, and you were looking at empathy and altruism in your PhD. So if we take a couple of steps backwards then, or back, and think about sort of your route into academia and how you kind of got to this place, I guess kind of the what did that path into academia look like? And do you think there were any key turning points for you as you progressed into where you are now?
Right. So I ended up doing psychology accidentally because yeah, it's true. I mean, there's people, you know, who may have done psychology in college, you know, and they might be super interested about mental health, but you know, this wasn't my case. You know, actually, I studied mathematics, economics, geography. You know, like it had nothing to do with psychology. And you know, there was a point where I was like, I don't know whether I should actually study a degree in mathematics. There was a point where I was, you know, debating whether to do English literature because, you know, I really love, you know, learning about foreign languages. And then, you know, but when I was checking like the modules, I was like, this sounds also boring. I couldn't imagine myself doing like 5 years of grammar, syntax, whatever. And then, you know, I came across psychology and I read, you know, like the syllabus of all the possible modules. And I was like, oh, this sounds really interesting. I mean, I didn't know much about psychology, but I was like, this sounds really interesting. Okay, let's gonna get into it. And I'm not gonna lie, you know, if I say that in the first term, maybe it's because, you know, I have this very naive conception of psychology, not as a science. You know, I was like, I don't really know if this is really what I want to do. And I thought about quitting. I mean, thankfully, I didn't. But then, you know, I discovered a side of psychology that I didn't expect it, and I loved it. You know, this perspective of, you know, science in which, you know, we can do research and we can investigate and we can measure things. I mean, not perfectly, because, you know, we're relatively a young science, and I would say, you know, one of the most challenging ones, because, you know, it's like it's not always 2 + 2 = 4 in psychology. So I think it's a very challenging discipline, but, you know, I loved it, and I became so interested because, you know, I was very fortunate, you know, with all the lecturers that I had. I studied at Autónoma in Madrid, and I was so fortunate. And they were, you know, always telling us about all the research, you know, conducted either by other people or themselves, and I became fascinated. And then, you know, there was this, so I did a 5-year degree. So during my year 3, one of the largest you know, assessment publishers, you know, put a poster in our building, and, you know, and it was a contest, you know, for developing a psychological test. And I don't know what crossed, you know, the mind of a colleague and myself, but we thought, why don't we, because, you know, we had studied psychometrics by then. We had a whole year of, you know, psychometrics, and we were like, okay, what about if we work in developing a test, you know, and we apply for the contest? I mean, what were we thinking? I don't even know. But anyway, we started thinking, you know, like how, I mean, what topic we developed the test, you know, we were reading, and suddenly it was like, why don't we do it on empathy? And we were like, yeah, it's fantastic. So we embarked, you know, at the beginning of my year 3, I embarked on this massive literature review. I didn't know anything about Prisma or systematic reviews or whatever, but, you know, we ended up doing a proper systematic review of, you know, the theories, the measures, and we developed a questionnaire. And you know, and I remember it was such a wonderful experience because, you know, I had all the energy, the motivation, the enthusiasm, and, you know, and because, you know, we wanted to do such a global measure, we ended up talking with professors, you know, who studied biological processes, professors who, you know, studied cognitive processes, social processes, you know, clinical processes. So we ended up developing, you know, quite an interesting questionnaire. And thank goodness, one of our psychometrics, you know, professor also became interested in giving us a hand, because, you know, we did the best we could, but, you know, and we did most of the analysis, but of course, you know, there was some fine tuning that, you know, you need to have the experience and the expertise, and we didn't have that at that time. So we submitted it and we didn't win. And, you know, and a year passed, and there was this advertisement for the first international conference on emotional intelligence. And again, you know, I was in my 4th year undergraduate, didn't have any budget. So I remember we were sleeping in this dorm, at the time of the conference that was part of the university, that, it wasn't even a proper bed. I had a massive back pain, but anyway, we attended the conference, we tried to dress, the best we could. And, I remember that there were people, from the University of Yale that came, for the first international conference. It was organized, by people from the University of Malaga. And and I remember we submitted a talk and we submitted a poster, and both got accepted, and they were introducing us as if we were PhD students. And I was like, oh my life, I was like, should I contradict to them, like saying, actually I'm not doing my PhD yet, I'm just an undergrad. But it was great. We prepared the poster in English, which it was a great experience, and we delivered the talk the best we could. And the talk was actually on the development of the questionnaire. And among the public, there was I don't know how to define his role. I would say it was like a headhunting person from this publisher that we submitted it for the contest. And he was like, I work in this company, and and I'm headhunting, like different questionnaires that the researchers might have developed, and I found your measure very interesting, and and I think that we would be very interested in having a meeting with you. And we were like, well, but we actually submitted the questionnaire and we didn't win. So I mean, we didn't receive any other response saying that that they would welcome our questionnaire. So we were like, well, thank you. We didn't want to get enthusiastic, because we were like, we haven't won. They didn't get in touch with us. So and he was like, well, just leave it with me, because I think there's lots of potential in your questionnaire. And we were like, okay, yeah, cool. So at the same time, while this was happening, I was doing all sorts of volunteering, to try to get as much research experience. And at that time, I mean, already in year 3, I knew I wanted to do a PhD. I really knew I wanted to do a PhD. So I was writing, like this theoretical review we did about empathy, and so we were working on different things at the same time. So long story short, before finishing my degree, I had a couple of papers published, in Spanish, but a couple of papers published, and also the questionnaire. So the questionnaire was published by this publisher, and I still remember, it was very shocking to me, being still on my year 5 and going into the library of the psychology. I mean, in the case of Madrid, they call it faculty, because it's a proper, really big building. So I remember, to get into the library, and they have the shelves where they put like the new items they have acquired, and just seeing my questionnaire over there, it felt really surreal. It's like, okay, it's like, so it felt really surreal. So I applied, because it was 5 years degree, and then you can do the PhD. So I applied for scholarships, because PhD is a big commitment, and unless you have some sort of financial support, it can be really, really tough, and it's really difficult, because if you have the financial support, you can really put everything into it. Otherwise, you have to juggle work and PhD, which can be done, but it's not as smoothly as it could be. Either way, I was again fortunate enough to get a scholarship that is awarded by the Spanish government. They only give a small proportion to each discipline. So in psychology, there were just 11 for the whole of Spain. Wow. So it is a very competitive program. And they funded me for 4 years, which gave me the scope and the opportunity to do my PhD, and also to do a short stay abroad. And and I was really fortunate. So while I was finishing my PhD, because of course it's a time of uncertainty, I started teaching at a private university, but things didn't turn out as I expected them, because I thought that, you know, once I have my PhD, maybe they're going to offer me a contract and I can stay here. It didn't happen. And, you know, I have to say, you know, just for context, the economical situation in Spain was really bad. So I was like, well, I have to do something. And I started applying, and, you know, and I was panicking because, you know, at that time, there weren't that many lectureships or postdoc opportunities. And, you know, and I was just thinking, well, maybe I can even go to the UK, you know, work as a pair and try to volunteer in some research labs, you know. So I was just thinking about, you know, like this plan B if it doesn't work out. But luckily, well, I was doing a short stay at Oxford, paid by one scholarship. I interviewed for a postdoc position in Plymouth, and, you know, and I got it. And it was a massive relief, because, you know, it was like 3 years funded where, you know, I could continue doing research. And again, you know, it was, I didn't think about doing a postdoc, you know, after my PhD, because I thought, like, well, I've done my PhD, I think I can figure it out. But, you know, I would recommend to everyone watching this that, you know, if you are doing a PhD, if you can do a postdoc, you know, it's absolutely recommendable 100%, because, you know, I just feel that, you know, everything that I didn't learn during my PhD, the postdoc actually gave me the opportunity to be more confident and to become, you know, an independent researcher. And then after my postdoc, sorry, I'm just trying to reduce the journey. So during my postdoc, I guess, you know, the most stressful time was, again, finding a job. So I started the search 1 year before it was over. And you know, and because I just wanted to see, you know, how the market was working, and, you know, and getting more experience with interviews, because of course, you know, the interview that you do for a postdoc, it is not the same that the kind of interview you do as an academic. You know, they ask you about, you know, your admin experience, they ask you about your teaching experience, and you know, and I just feel after, you know, having interviewed in many years, many times, you know, that the more you interview, the better you become at it. So, you know, again, I would recommend, you know, starting soon to get this experience. So I remember it was a very, very stressful time, and I wouldn't go back to it. Like, you know, if you say I give you money if you go back to that time, I wouldn't go back to it, because, you know, it was incredibly stressful.
Yeah.
And you know, to the point that, you know, it kind of affects, you know, your physical health as well. And you know, and I interview for so many roles, and it's interesting, you know, like how to digest, you know, these rejections. Some universities, because they think your research profile still is not good enough, it doesn't have the caliber that they're after. Some other universities that might be more teaching oriented, they don't see you as a good candidate because potentially you're too research oriented. So, you know, I was kind of in this, you know, in between, and luckily then, you know, I got 3 different offers, and I got the offer that I thought it was best for me at that time. And I'm not gonna lie to say that this first lecturer job felt at the beginning as a big slam on the face. Because you know, you move from this 100% of the time research role to suddenly have to juggle everything. So you have to juggle admin, because you will be given, you know, different academic roles. You have to juggle your teaching, you have to juggle your marking, meeting with the students, the pastoral support you have to provide to them. But at the same time, you have to keep research active, because otherwise, you know, you risk just being, you know, be in a teaching and a scholarship role, which I'm not saying it's bad. I mean, it all depends, you know, personal preferences, but this is not what, you know, I was inclined to. You know, I always, you know, had very, very clear motivation for having, you know, research and scholarship, not just teaching and scholarship. And it was a struggle at the beginning. So it meant that you have to end up working many more hours than it's officially registered in your contract. So you have to end up working evenings, you have to end up working weekends, you have to end up working holidays, and and sometimes it's like, where's the free time? Where's the free time? But in my case, this then allowed me to move to my current position, in Manchester. I mean, I'm still very thankful for this, prior position, because I was given so much responsibility in terms of teaching, in terms of admin, that 1 year in that institution was like 6 years somewhere else. So it really equips you, but it can be really, really tough. So yeah, I think that's pretty much my journey. Hope it wasn't too long.
No, I think it's really interesting, because something that's not often talked about with PhD students is that kind of existential crisis that starts creeping in when you've got about a year left on your PhD.
Yeah.
And everybody talks about the academic, road, and the highs and the lows and the slumps and everything. But the connection with the way that people are feeling about what comes next is often not discussed that much.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think a lot of PhD students who are looking for that next role, whether it's a postdoc or a lectureship or whatever it is that they're looking for, don't always realize that everybody is feeling much the same.
Yeah.
And I think, having that sense of community, maybe, or people being more open to discuss how uncomfortable that uncertainty about what comes next is, I don't know whether it would help, but it's definitely something that everybody feels. And so it's good to know that people who are successful and people who are doing incredible work now also had the same feelings that PhD students today feel when they are thinking about what comes next, so that they can see that it's part of the normal progression. It shouldn't be, but
it shouldn't be, but it is. And I think that some positives about nowadays is that thanks to the technology, it is possible to actually find this group of PhD students or postdocs who may be in a similar situation, and you can talk to them. I mean, in my time there was internet. I mean, it's not that I that I come from the dinosaurs, but I don't think that digital communities of PhD students or postdocs were so prevalent as nowadays. So I think this is a very interesting resource that people can definitely use.
Yeah, agree. So thinking about then sort of now, I guess, more present, what is it that you think, what part of the job feels most meaningful to you?
Well, I have a bias.
Big question.
I have a bias. I mean, I love teaching, especially when I have the opportunity to teach about social psychology or emotions, or like even my own research topic. I really love teaching and and communicating with the students, and talking about what I do, and the different research questions that I'm trying to answer. But something that I really love about my job is the research side. I think if I would remove the research side, I would feel very sad. That's something that I'm so passionate and so interested, that that's my I think that is really my favorite part of
the thing that
job.
Gets you out of bed in the morning, as the old saying goes, the
Yeah.
research. So what do you think is something that people don't realize about an academic career until they might already be in it?
Well, I think one of the issues is competition. And I don't know whether people speak about it very openly, but I have observed lots of competition, even if it's not people who are directly researching your same topic. It's very interesting to see, and I think academia, by definition, is a competitive context because, everything is assessed in metrics, like how many papers you publish, and, in what quartile, and, how many grants do you get, and how much money do you get, in those grants. So everything is really by the metric. And I understand, we need to have some sort of indices, to assess people performance, but I think that if not handled properly, it can really become something that, instead of favoring, the development of great ideas, it can actually hinder the field.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I see this quite a lot, like having meetings, in which someone, might be sharing ideas and other people, just staying silent, potentially thinking, oh, actually, that's quite interesting, and I can actually use this in my research, rather than sharing, and I think that, as a community, it would be great, if we could engage more in this sharing, rather than, thinking how I can try to move faster, or take advantage that, these people are moving, slightly slower, to be the first one to put the idea out. But yeah, I think that the competition, it's something that, if I think about, myself, for example, when developing the questionnaire, I had no idea about the competition, and then, as the questionnaire was published, I saw some competition, and as I got into, further academic roles, I saw even more and more and more competition. So I think it's something that you realize, as you progress in your career.
So I think that is a really important part, because often with competition comes things like loss of confidence for people. So thinking about kind of whether it's yourself or whether it's PhD students or other early career academics in your department, or just wherever, to be honest, what do you think is a really big thing that shapes confidence early on in someone's career, or even now, in terms of like mentors, collaborators, lab groups, communities, that kind of things? And what kind of things do you think are helpful practically in those kind of contexts to build confidence?
Okay, so I think this is a very interesting and important question, because I think that a big issue is, and I don't think, people speak about it that much, is the relationship with the supervisor. And I think that, if you have a positive relationship with your supervisor, this is gonna give you confidence, because your supervisor is gonna praise the work you do. It's normal that sometimes people make mistakes, because as PhD students, postdocs, even ourselves, we're still learning, because we don't know everything, and it's very normal to make mistakes. So I think that unless they are intentional, they shouldn't escalate into a big conflict. And I think this positive relationship, it's key to have confidence, because if the supervisor is abusive, or it doesn't positively reinforce what the student is doing, this can really undermine the confidence. And I had the opportunity to talk to other PhD students, and who didn't have very positive relationships with their supervisors, and I can see many people who have quitted academia. It has happened right after PhD, and they don't want to know anything about academia, precisely because the relationship with the supervisor went awry. And so I think this is one aspect. I think the second thing is, I know it's gonna sound like a little bit like logic, but I think that irrespective of what happens with the supervisor, if you are really passionate about an idea and you think it makes sense, just try to believe in yourself. Because, what I have experienced myself, and, what I say to all the people around me who are currently doing PhD, not just my PhD students, but also all the people that I know, is that sometimes, people are not going to believe in you because, potentially they will try to put their ideas first and they will try to undermine your own ideas. So I think it's very important, to repeat to ourselves, my ideas matter, what I do matters, and, and if I keep putting effort and working hard and doing things in the right way, potentially I can make a difference. I know it sounds like a slogan, but, I genuinely think that sometimes, we have to talk to ourselves this way, because sometimes we expect other people to praise us, or, the people to thank for the work we're doing, but they're not going to do it. So I think it's very important that we're kind to ourselves, because this is, what is really going to create the path, to persevering. Because otherwise, it's very easy to say, well, my supervisor thinks that, I'm not doing a great job. Sometimes, it might be good with a good reason, but many times, it's not without, without a legitimate reason. And it's very easy, to be deflated and think, what's the point of continuing? So it's very important, to be nice to oneself and to believe in what you're doing.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I think something that is really important to know about an academic career is that there's constant rejection. Even when you're in a post permanently, there's grant rejection, there's paper rejections, there's rejection from ideas at pitch-to-peer type, contexts or sessions. There's always an opportunity for something to be rejected. And that rejection can be really hard, and to build up kind of a resilience to that rejection can take time, and it can definitely knock people's confidence. And so I think, being kind and being aware that this rejection is something that's going to continue right throughout. People who are very long-term senior professors are still getting grants rejected, and maybe don't say as much that stings, but it does sting. It stings all the time, no matter how kind of experienced you are.
Yes, and I would, in terms of rejections, I think it's very important. It seems that I'm just applying, my own research here, but it's true. I think some people I have observed, during my academic career, I had the opportunity to work with many different people, which I think, is brilliant, because you can see how things are done differently. But I have observed some people early in my career that they used to take things very personal. So, for example, they were receiving, a rejection from a paper, and they were like, well, it's rejected because, and a superficial excuse. And every time I get a rejection, I try to think rejection is redirection. And I'm not saying that this means you have to change everything you have done in your life, but for example, if I get a paper rejected, I sit down and say, okay, let's go through the review. And I really try to take a critical stance at myself, not in a negative way, but just to think, okay, is there anything in this piece of research that can be improved? Because the review system, which leads to another video, people are really generous in providing those comments. So sure, I mean, you always find, like sometimes people provide all comments and it's like, did you really read the paper? But, most of the time, people are quite generous, and they would, give you some insight into something you haven't really considered. And maybe, it gives you a scope to rewrite something that is not clear, reanalyze the data in a different way, or maybe to run a new study that you haven't even considered. So I learned very early on that taking it personal didn't help progressing, whereas trying to think what could be of use actually helps you improve a lot. So I think my advice would be to be open-minded, about this rejection and not taking it in a personal way.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's quite interesting because you've just described exactly what it is that you study too, right? So this idea of taking a situation that's, you know, perhaps not the best outcome. We all would prefer not to have a rejection come through on a paper that we've written, but repraising this as being an opportunity to reflect on and improve the work that we've done can be such a great way to both take what could be negative feelings of that essential rejection and turning it into something that can then improve the thing that it is that we're passionate about and that we want to do. And that's, I guess, something that is also really important is, yes, we can reappraise for ourselves, but one of the great things about having really good collaborators and co-authors is that there's that opportunity for interpersonal motion regulation where we can say, hey, I feel bad about this thing. They said this, but I don't think that's a fair comment. And then our co-author can say, actually, here's how this, you know, we can think about this differently. Or, you know, if we, you know, so that intrinsic interpersonal motion regulation, but if we are then seeing that, you know, a PhD student that we might be working with on a particular project feels bad about getting rejection, then we as the regulators can reach out for this extrinsic interpersonal regulation and try to say, hey, you know, this happens, and you know, let's work on making this the best that we can, and you know, trying to make them feel better through this process and building, helping them to build that confidence and resilience for themselves as well. It's something that I think is really interesting about the particular area of work that you do is just how important it is in every single area of our lives where there are other people involved, particularly from the interpersonal perspective. Because it's in every kind of relationship, whether it's work, whether it's romantic, friendship, family, you know, a stranger in the street, there's always some kind of communication that can crop up that will come back to somebody's experiencing something and what can you do, or how can I get help for what I'm experiencing from someone else. It's really fascinating. And so some of the things that you're looking at the moment are more AI mediated support and things like that. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, basically, you know, we ended up looking at artificial intelligence. I always say by accident. It's true. We ended up by accident because so some of my research includes, you know, qualitative data, and you know, because I mean, questionnaires are great, you know, you can get lots of responses very quickly, but you know, providing people open-ended questions, you know, it's also very interesting because you don't put constraints on participants, but it's very time-consuming. And you know, we were doing this thematic analysis. You know, it was a lot of participants. You know, it's not like the typical qualitative study in which you just have 50 people or 80 people and that's it. You know, it was hundreds and hundreds of participants' narratives, and you know, and we were having these, you know, coding meetings, and we were like, oh, can you imagine if AI could code? And we're like, actually, we could investigate, you know, whether AI could be of help, and that's, you know, that's how we started. But then, you know, this, you know, explosion of different LLMs emerged. So it wasn't just, you know, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Grok, Copilot, whatever, you know, like all the possible different menu you can think of, and you know, and we started reading about, you know, these statistics on how prevalent it was becoming for especially for adults, you know, to use these tools, you know, if we want to call it this way, to talk about, you know, like everyday things, and you know, it could be like how to address a situation they were not sure, or how to calm down, and I was like, hold on a minute, but this is actually what we're investigating, but in the digital context. So we started running you know, like different studies, you know, in which we are trying to understand whether LLMs can perform regulation in a similar way to humans. So basically, you know, we presented human participants and LLMs, different scenarios, and we said, how would you respond to a person in that situation? And we assess, whether the type of strategies used are similar or not, and then, how this is perceived by potential recipients of that regulation. So this has been, some of the work. This is some of the work that we're currently doing. One of my PhD students also investigating to understand, she's trying to understand whether there are a different profile of users and, how this links to well-being. And but this is roughly, mainly what we're doing.
That's fantastic. It's really, really topical at the moment to think about the impacts of AI from multiple different uses on well-being and all sorts of different other kind of individual differences and things like that. It sounds really fascinating. I'm looking forward to seeing all of this come out, obviously.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for your time. I think this has been really interesting and hopefully really informative for ECRs and PhD students who are watching as well. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, thanks for having me.